And I
And
think
what
that's
was the
even more
group?
surprising because he was
Sorry to
it's
interrupt.
a liberal.
What was
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
what
I thought
what
you
was the ruling group at that point in time? It was
the
still
TPLF, the TPLF, the
okay.
Tigray group, the Tigray ruling group.
And then you said that you worked to put together information to give the president at the time.
Yeah, so like every day, um, we do what we call like I worked at the U.S. Embassy then, right? When he visited in 2015, I was a U.S. Embassy employee in Addis Ababa. So one of our jobs in the public affairs section was to put together um, a daily brief media report that included political activities and media activities and pass it along to Washington, right? And the United States government, the State Department issues um, a report, very broad based report every year that addresses human rights, media related issues, media suppression, freedom of expression, religion, etc., etc.
Do you feel that there were issues with like technology affordability or like any other kind of like inequality as far as when you were getting the information? Could there have possibly been censorship on its way to where it was supposed to be going?
Yeah. So I'm sure you've heard of what's known as the digital divide um, between those who have access to the technologies that, for example, simply we could start with the phone, the smartphone that we carry with ourselves, right, every day, everywhere we go. And, you know, something happens, you get a news story, you get a notification on your phone, ping, there is something going on, ping, there is this, there is that, right? So not everyone can afford to have a smartphone. That's the divide there. The haves and the have-nots between, um, for example, in Ethiopia, you could talk about people in the cities vis-a-vis people in rural areas. People in rural areas cannot afford smartphones, most of them. Even if they can afford, they cannot read, right? Because of literacy. We need to understand. Um, Now, there are more phones in Amharic, but again, as I told you, Amharic is one of the languages that's being targeted as language of the oppressor. Um, so there is literacy issues, and there is access to technology, um, in terms of, computers and phones, um, and probably, the radio is now on the phone as well, right? Everybody has, this app or, something incorporated into today's cell phones where you could also listen to the radio. Um, but that technology in countries such as Ethiopia, with a lot of poverty, is not widely affordable for everyone. So affordability is an issue. Literacy is an issue. And sometimes, the powers that be just turn it off on you, so you don't have any access to
And
information.
would that technology barrier be along the lines of similar ethnic barriers, or is it more spread out to where it's not very specified who's rich and who's poor ethnically?
Um,
Is it more of a rural versus non-rural issue? I know that sometimes rural communities can have issues with?
So like in terms of technological divide, it's more rural versus urban. But in terms of access to resources, it depends again, as Jeremy was pointing out, who controls the federal government, right? So if your ethnicity controls the federal government, then there are more likely to be more resources to people from the ethnic community vis-a-vis others. But it might be hard to conclude and say that, you know, for example, when the TPLF, which is from Tigray, dominated the government, obviously we had more rich people from the ethnic community because they controlled all the resources. And now that they're being pushed out, you know, there are signs now that, you know, the Oromos now control all the resources, and you have more affluent people, you know, emerging, you know, from that ethnic background. So it's hard to say that the divides in terms of technology are based on ethnicity, but I think it could translate well into that as well. But I think it's a hard conclusion to make.
Would you say that it's kind of like people who tend to be in the rural area tend to be of a specific ethnicity, and that's why it's kind of because they're being pushed out, or?
No, not really. So only about 15% of the country is urbanized, but the rest of the population. So it's largely a rural population. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm just trying to connect all the, like, is there a connection I missed or something? Yeah.
Well, there's a sort of connection. So from what I've heard, yes, the people with more power kind of breed more power and have more resources, but it's not completely unheard of to have rich people outside of the ruling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So I guess just a couple more, and then we're gonna be wrapping up. One that kind of glanced over. Well, first of all, is there something that we haven't really addressed? Something that is a major point to be made here, or something that you've wanted to say, or it hasn't really come up?
I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but I think we've covered a lot, I think.
Me too. I think this has been a really productive and informative. A lot of interesting things going on. And
I'm glad
finally,
to hear that.
I guess our last question is, what is some advice that maybe you give your own class that you might want to give our class when it comes to media journalism and becoming them even?
Yeah. So being a journalist is one of the most, I think globally, it is the second most dangerous profession. Journalists are not safe anywhere in the world, even here in the United States. We've seen, particularly with the last administration, that even in the freest of the countries in the world, such as the United States, you could be targeted. I wouldn't forget that moment when Jim Acosta of the CNN had a sort of fight with the president, and then they tried to throw him out of the White House because he was the White House correspondent for the CNN then. But because there is rule of law in the United States, they were not able to do that to him. If I've always imagined if this had been in my country, Jim Acosta probably wouldn't be alive today if he were an Ethiopian journalist. So, and sometimes you have to go to this dangerous place where, for example, there is war, and you have to report. And sometimes you get shot and you die as you're doing your job. So journalism is not an easy profession, but I think it pays off, in terms of maybe not financially, but in terms of the impact that it has on the lives of those that you serve. So you're not going to be rich, but you are going to be influential in what you do is going to have a huge impact on the lives of a lot of people. So you have to be proud of yourself to be in this profession, but you also need to brace yourself, because the world is not very friendly towards journalists.
We'll be morally wealthy.
Yes, very wealthy.
Oh, my dog.
In that sense, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us today. Oh my goodness, my dog is starting now.
Oh, it's saying hello.
He's saying get off.
Yeah, I think he needs your attention now. So yeah, it was great to talk to you guys.
Thank you. It's been almost perfectly an hour. I think this is pretty
yes
great for our side. You're a great interviewee.
Thank you.
We're thankful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Alani. And it was great to talk to you.
Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Goodbye.